we are going to have our first panel. And as I said, we're going to get Brexit off our chests early. And I've got no better panel to do that. So I'd like to invite James Codling from Venture Founders, co-founder of Venture Founders, Tim Mills, who's the investment director at the Angel Co-Fund, Simon Murdoch, who is an angel investor and, of course, managing partner and founder of Episode 1 Ventures, and Simon Thorpe, who is our Angel of the Year, and Sarah Turner, who is from Angel Academy and a great supporter of women investors. And who better to moderate the panel than we continue with our wonderful colleagues from the Scale Up Institute, Irene Graham, who's the CEO of the Scale Up Institute, who many of you will know. So Irene, over to you.
Jenny, thank you very, very much. Can you all hear me at the back? Are you doing okay? Very good. Welcome, panelists. As Jenny says, this is our ability to get the overall Brexit question off our chest, nice and early in the day. And you're all a great exemplar of our different ecosystem of investors and champions of businesses that are growing. I'm going to ask each of you in turn just to say a little bit about what you actually do day to day and what you currently think is happening in the marketplace in terms of what you're seeing in the investor community, what you're seeing in the business environment, and just giving a perspective of what you think the positives and challenges of Brexit are. And in order to just mix this up a little bit, we're going to start with Sarah as the single woman on the panel. Sarah.
Thank you, Irene. So I'm Sarah Turner. I'm the founder of Angel Academy. We have the mission of making angel investment easy, fun, and rewarding for women. So women are massively underrepresented in this environment. We'd like to bring more women into the marketplace. So what I'm seeing, big picture in terms of Brexit, there's a huge risk of just adding to the speculation here. I think we're clearly in uncertain times, and uncertainty doesn't inspire confidence at all. I was thinking about what are the main things that we need to help our businesses grow, and that's access to talent. And actually, I was looking at our portfolio. We've invested in 12 women-led businesses. They're all on their scale-up journey. Half of the founders of those businesses are foreign-born citizens. So actually allowing access to talent is vital, that we have enough high-quality businesses in the first place, but also that they have the skills and the talent to grow. So the flip side of that, there is an opportunity potentially to recruit from other places in the world. We've depended very heavily on Europe. So there's definitely an opportunity there to get our immigration policy right. Access to funding is clearly critical. I don't see any immediate impact on what's happening in angel capacity. Certainly with my members, we're quite well insulated with the tax breaks and things, but the concern is around follow-on funding. A large number of our key funds are anchored by European EIF money, isn't it? European Investment Fund money, so question marks about follow-on funding. And also we need clear access to markets. So we need access to customers and we need low regulation when working with those customers. So if not Europe, we need trade deals with other parts of the world. I've probably said far too much.
No,
I should
that's perfect.
Hand over.
Simon, as Angel of the Year, capacity, investment opportunities, is investment drying up? What's your views?
No, investment's not drying up. So a bit of context on me. So I'm probably best known for backing many companies in the UK. I backed 25 startups, mainly startups, fairly early stage companies. I am also known for being a key proponent of the digital economy, which I think is a massive opportunity for the UK, precisely because the growth rate of the digital economy is 6%. And as we all know, the growth rate of the UK economy as a whole is 1 to 2%, if we're lucky. We'll come back to that. I guess I regard myself as British, I regard myself as a European, but I thought very carefully about how to vote in the referendum. I did vote in, I nearly voted out. I think one of the questions we're going to be asked today is what can politicians do to help the environment. And the main thing I think they can do is actually come up with a plan All our politicians for the last 40 years haven't planned at all. We don't have a housing policy. We don't have an energy policy that's worth talking about. We have a tax system that's unfit for purpose. We have a number of significant issues which our politicians would be best to concentrate on rather than meddling in every way that they do. So that would be the best thing in my mind that they could do. I've seen very little impact on my companies to date, but that's really because we don't really know what Brexit means yet. So that's probably enough for me to get going. Let the other speakers.
Coming up with a plan. Okay, well, we'll take on that one in a moment. Simon, over to you.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Simon Murdoch, and all it says angel investor on here. I've had a period where I was originally an internet entrepreneur and set up companies sold to Amazon. Did a lot of, I've been a VC 3 times, I'm on the 3rd time now. So I'm not supposed to do much, if any, angel investment at the moment because I'm running episode 1, which is early stage VC, investing in software-driven businesses in the UK. And it's an enterprise capital fund supported by British Business Bank. I obviously a massive fan of investing as an angel, investing in things like Love Film, Zoopla, Shazam, FanDuel, which is in the news at the moment. And latest good news is Perkbox. I really believe in what Sherry said, is that we should celebrate role models. And Saurav Chopra that runs Perkbox is a fantastic entrepreneur, amazing culture in that company, and they're just raising 4 million on Seeders. So a good shout out to him. And as far as possible, we should shout out great celebration in businesses across the UK and great investors. I think that people ought to hear more about successful investors. In terms of Brexit, I think that the period of uncertainty we're going to have for the next 2.5 years obviously is a bit of a pain. But the great thing for early stage companies is that they're in challenging environments all the time. It's really hard to start a business. It's really hard to scale a business. And so that macro situation will have minor effects on the sort of the maelstrom of what it's like to run a startup, which I know having done it. So that's one piece of context. The currency devaluation is actually helpful for inward investment. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen over the next couple of years with currency, but we're raising another fund at the moment, and it's helpful for us. European investors look on the UK now as cheap, but still with huge potential, which is good news in one sense. And so overall, I'm very optimistic about the next few years, and Sherry positioned it as the next 5 to 15 years. We'll have a period of uncertainty for 2 or 3 years, but the long-term future is still absolutely fantastic in the UK, and we do need to look globally. There's some short-term issues, which I'm sure we'll talk about, to do with particularly hiring people from Europe. We've seen in some of our companies that Europeans that were applying for jobs in our companies are now cautious about coming to the UK, not stopping, but cautious. So I completely agree with you that what we need is our government to be much more positive about the benefits of immigration, the benefits of looking worldwide. Unfortunately, the politics of immigration is very tarnished because lots of people across the country found immigration a challenge in their local areas. And we need to, like shouting out role models of entrepreneurship, we ought to shout out for role models of immigration, which has been absolutely fantastic for the economy. I think that's enough for now. I'll pass
we'll
on.
pick that one up. Simon, Tim, the man from the government, quasi, British Business Bank, the people that don't have a plan, apparently, according to Simon at the beginning, views. I mean, there's a lot the British Business Bank's doing. You run the co-fund, so
yeah,
tell us about that.
so I wear 2 hats. It's just got one of those down there. So I run the Angel Co-Fund, which is my day job, but I'm also part of the venture capital team at the British Business Bank. So prior to running the Angel Co-Fund, I used to spend my time investing in venture funds. I don't do so much of that now. But the Angel Co-Fund, we're investing alongside angel investors into UK businesses, and at the end of this year we'll be celebrating 5 years of doing that. So we've built a big portfolio in that time, 70 companies, put 35 million alongside about 140 million from angel investors into those companies, and we've gone on the journey and seen some great successes through that process. And in the spirit of the day, naming names of successful companies. So eBree was one of our early investments. That company today is 100 times bigger than it was when we invested. It's no longer an SME. It's grown, and it's now a full-fledged middle-sized company. It's attracted mainstream US private equity and really scaled. And we've got a number of other companies in the portfolio like that. Gusto similarly has scaled. Blue Wireless Technologies, a silicon fab company that's scaled. So to the question of Brexit, though, and all of those companies, coming back to Sarah's and Simon touched on it, the theme of EU nationals being key employees of those companies, the founders or the key employees of those companies are almost exclusively dominated by EU nationals. So that's a key concern for us, and probably the biggest concern when looking at Brexit more broadly. The topic of this debate is around the growth of the angel ecosystem. I think growth from an investor and a capital point of view is not what we're really looking for at this point. If you look where we were 5 years ago, the amount of capital that's coming into early stage companies is probably 3 or 4 times the amount of capital available today. We probably don't want more capital flowing in to the early stage, but it is about ensuring that we've got capital for later stage companies and that capital doesn't stop flowing. So for me, talent and later stage capital are the key things that we're focused on. And I guess, just sort of touching on the question of market, what do we see at this point? I think we definitely see a market which is less buoyant than it was 12 months ago. But to disaggregate that's part of a global trend. To disaggregate that and say how much of that is to do with Brexit and how much is to do with that is just that's what's happening globally. It's very hard to say.
James, you're representing the crowds today. What do you think the crowd view is of the challenges at this present time? What are you seeing in that marketplace?
So I run an investment platform called Venture Founders, which gives people the ability to invest in relatively early stage but scale-up companies, typically venture-backed or angel-backed. Our investors tend to be high-net-worth, sophisticated investors. I was very pessimistic about Brexit. I was rather worried because actually a lot of the liquidity that's coming into our market is individuals. It's individuals who have mortgages to pay, kids to put through school, and I was worried that actually we'd see some of that drying up. We haven't so far. I mean, I think in the short term, people are just getting on with it. People like EIS, people like SCIS, and they're going to continue to have that as part of a diversified portfolio. We have seen some people be more cautious and thinking about actually supporting the businesses that they're currently in rather than looking to new opportunities because they know that they're going to need follow-on capital. In terms of the companies, we've raised money for, I think, 16 businesses now since we launched 2 years ago. I've only seen 2 examples of deals pulled because of Brexit. And I question whether that was actually Brexit related or not, or whether it was just an excuse.
And James, on that, how many of you have done deals there's quite a few deals happening in the marketplace since Brexit. I mean,
we've done lots of deals.
Many deals happening weekly. I mean, I think that's an important message for everybody here. I mean, the money is flowing out, and you've just said it, a few, yes, that have been maybe pulled back, but was it about Brexit? Or was
I don't think it was. I mean, I think the one specifically, I think it was more of a get-out excuse. But we've certainly seen foreign investment coming into the UK, and one in particular, which Tim's involved in. We've seen a rather material investment from a foreign investor since Brexit, which is great news.
Great. I mean, let's pick that up because there's also a big debate that happens here in the UK sometimes, and let's talk about this capacity. You've all, in one way or another, talked about follow-on funding. James, you've talked about current investors thinking about reinvesting rather than looking at new opportunities, which might have been a different trend. There's a lot of debate about it's great that we have, and you mentioned it, Simon, the current environment is actually attracting foreign investment. It's a good place to invest in. But then there's a debate about, hold on, companies are then owned by others outside of UK. So, what do we have to do? This debate about UK and UK being the key players that need to invest more, and how do we unlock that, and that mix between UK and international investors?
I pick up on one key thing you said there, which we should be careful about. We should very much think about ourselves as part of the global economy. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with having foreign investors in UK companies. In fact, it should be celebrated and encouraged because then helps our businesses to move overseas, which is really important. So I'm a massive fan.
I'm not saying I propose, I just challenge it. I know there's lots of those debates
So there's and the great thing is that the investment is continuing, so I would expect that the couple of cases you're talking about were very soon after June the 23rd.
Yeah, they were almost immediately after June.
So there was a wobble at the end of June, beginning of July, but but it's very much been business as usual over the summer and as autumn continues. There's loads going on in the community, and I think that's great.
And you mentioned that. I mean, it is an international investor can give you that access to markets, and I think Sarah, you sort of touched about access to markets and customers is a really key part. In terms of the challenges that the businesses are facing at the moment, and we'll come back to talent and skills, which is touched on by all of you. But how is that access to markets challenged? What more can be done in that regard? Do you think, particularly as we look at this current climate? And Simon, you touched on it, the government needing a plan. Sarah, sorry.
Well, I mean, UKTI has already been mentioned. I do a little bit of work for UKTI. They have a large amount of programs helping companies export and also encouraging the inward investment, but two sides of the same coin, I think. And I just encourage us to get our companies involved in those and looking at new markets and being a bit more creative and ambitious about it.
Do you see that as a role for the angel investor and part of the
well, absolutely, to point people in the right direction. Simon and I have been both speaking to a new business that's a crowdfunding platform that's enabling cross-border investing. So more of that. I think we've just got to be more creative and more international in our approach. And absolutely, we're part of a global community, aren't we?
Yeah. Simon, you had some challenges for the government.
Yeah, I think the global point is a really important one. So the internet's global, the banking system's global. So we can't be an island on our own, and that's been a big difficulty again for politicians, because they have two hands tied behind their back because they can only govern their own country. And the reality is most of these things are going on up here at a global level. So they can't control those things. Just to be clear, I mean, in terms of investment, I mean, I've probably made 6 new investments in the last 6 months. So, and I've seen no change in the activity level at all post-Brexit. There was a wobble for 2 or 3 days for sure. But it has increased the uncertainty. There is obviously there's always currency risk, but there's been greater currency risk. And there's clearly a greater uncertainty about what Brexit actually means. I think a lot of the rhetoric that's been used has been very unfortunate. A lot of it suggests we're not welcoming of people from all over the world, and absolutely we are. That's why the country is a great country. Immigration has been a great thing, but uncontrolled and unmanaged immigration is not a good thing, because it ties in with population growth. The population in the UK is growing, it's declining in Germany. So in the UK we have a slightly different view about immigration from Germany for obvious reasons. They need immigration more than we do. We need immigration, but we've got to have a plan for population growth. And we need a 10-year plan for population growth, and we don't have one. The population is growing at 500,000 a year. 300 of that is immigration, 200 is natural growth. So where's the plan? Where are the houses? Where are the schools? Where's the education? Where's the STEM subject focus? And where's the celebration of entrepreneurial culture and success that Sherry talked about earlier? It's absolutely right. When you read the newspapers, we see a successful female investor or an entrepreneur, and the press will be interested in what shoes they're wearing and what skirt they're wearing, not what they've actually achieved. And we have to change that culture.
So how do we do that? I mean, what ideas have you all got for doing that? Let's move it into the private sector now. The UKBAA, the area of media that was touched on earlier. You talk about celebration. What do we need to do there? What are the key things that help maybe bridge this uncertainty? What are the key themes that we need to be focused on? James, any views?
Well, for me, I mean, access to talent is something that, I mean, we surveyed all our companies. Access to talent has always been the number one thing that they've said coming out of Brexit. That, to me, starts with education. My chairman is very, very focused on ensuring that people have the right maths, science, coding skill sets to enable them for the digital economy, and they just don't at the minute. And that's my key hope coming out of this, that the government sits up and realises they've got to do something about it, because it isn't right. I mean, it is a great thing that we have all these people coming to the UK, and I have a lot of European people in my team, and I've always worked in a European environment. But actually, we need to culture that and put that culture in the universities and in the schools and celebrate entrepreneurship. I go around and I talk to a lot of universities, and I've only come across 2, and it wouldn't surprise you which ones they are, that I think have actually got it sort of sorted. Most of them don't even have entrepreneurship programs. They're just preparing their students for workplace, and that's got to change in my mind.
Other views on that? Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd offer a slightly different perspective. I mean, if you look at where we're mostly investing in businesses, it's at the point that they're taking a technology. We're usually sort of we're out of the lab, but there's still a lot of technology risk in those businesses, and they're continuing to develop. And we take them through to a process and support them through into commercialisation. And I would say, when you look at the UK, we're definitely world-class, no doubt about it, in terms of technology, science, research. I mean, you only have to look at the quality of the universities and institutions we've got. But where we do really seem to struggle is in that commercialisation phase. And I see that as being the key deficiency that we have. It's getting companies that can attract the right skills, the right talents in terms of sales, in terms of marketing, in terms of building networks of distributors, in terms of rolling products.
And Tim, as the man from the government, I'm going to call you the MIG on the platform today. Come on, this is the private sector. You've got hundreds, a room full of private sector here. There's been a lot of views about what the government needs to do and what do you say the private sector has to do? What do you want from the private sector here?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to pinch from Sol Klein, who made a comment the other day at an event at the Digital Catapult. He said, speaking to all those corporates out there, he said, you're all there going out, setting up accelerators, setting up your own innovation programs. What you should be doing, what you could really do to help these companies is go and become customers. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. That first major customer tends to be the thing that is completely transformational for an early stage business.
And it is, from the research we've done, quite difficult to break in there, and we're going to be talking about that more. Simon, perspectives from you.
Yeah, could I just say something about dealing with the press? I know, having tried in recent years to get some PR for episode 1 and for some of our companies, it is pretty difficult. The journalists, I don't know if there's any journalists in the room, pretty sceptical bunch. So I would throw the challenge back to you guys, particularly all the angel investors in the room. What you need is a hook to get in the press. So we all agree that the ideal thing is to get entrepreneurs talked about, you can get investors talked about, but let's concentrate on entrepreneurs, because I think being an entrepreneur is now the new rock and roll. It's the thing that is sexy. Lots of young people and middle-aged people too want to be entrepreneurs and to make a great success of their lives. So what my challenge to all of you is, if you happen to have entrepreneurs in your portfolio who have got a hook, that female entrepreneurs is a great hook, people who've come from disadvantaged backgrounds and now running great companies, you need that kind of hook to find the role models. Unfortunately, the sort of white middle-class males running a company that's turning over 2 million is not going to get in the press. So the challenge is to all of us to find those role models and get them talked about.
And can I just say that whilst it's sexy to be an entrepreneur, we want it also to be sexy to be a scale-up. So that's the other thing. Sarah?
Just to add to what Simon's saying, that my frustration with the media, yes, there's loads of white space for female founders to get in the press, but the press do focus on the ones that are mumpreneurs or creating very feminine-oriented business, and that's by no means a reflection of the entrepreneurial community we see and that we're supporting, and the ones that are likely to be the scale-ups of the future as well. So we need to be promoting highly articulate, intelligent female role models that are developing technology-enabled, scalable businesses, and not just the mumpreneurs, please. And on the angel side as well, we need to promote angels as the hero investors. They're the risk takers. They need to be seen as more diverse. It's not just Alan Sugar and a handful of very wealthy people, Deborah Meaden, that are angel investors. Actually, they're normal, hardworking people as well. We need to see more of them.
Any views?
Lots of views, but I just wanted to say something on, just go back to early stage versus scale up.
Yeah.
So
that capacity issue.
For me, because you touched on this earlier, Irene, we're actually doing the startup pretty well, I think. Yeah. And back to Tim's point, there's actually a lot of capital targeting the startup rather. And that's because the crowdfunding environment's been successful in attracting more interest, and because there are plenty of angels like me who are doing this. But where it gets more difficult is when you want to hand the baton on through replacement capital to somebody like Simon, or many of the other VC-type institutions that are out there, or maybe working with Tim at the co-fund, or working with the British Growth Fund. Yeah. These are all really important initiatives. And we need to get better at replacing my capital in order that I can find another 10 startups. And that's where I think we can spend some time
let's
focusing.
pick that theme up, because Sarah, you touched on it, and I hear it a lot. There's a lot of EU money in those follow-on funds. There's a lot of EU money in the VC market. How do we go about replacing that? Is there a bigger role for the British Business Bank in that role? Is there a bigger role for Business Growth Fund, which has been established by the UK banks? How do we look at replacing that capital if one assumes? Let's just take the assumption that it may not come from the EU anymore.
Well, I should let the rest of the panel say something, but I'd just say something. I think BGF, for example, British Growth Fund, has been excellent. But if I had a criticism, it would be that it's been a bit slow to target the digital economy. It's tended to...
Simon Calver has come to the rescue on that.
Yeah, well, he can certainly talk to that.
We'll pick that up with him later.
But so what I mean by that is they are very comfortable, well, it seems from the outside as an investor, they seem to be very comfortable in investing in what I call old-style analog businesses, but very slow to pick up digital businesses. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with analog businesses. Yeah. That's 10% of the economy, traditional manufacturing, 10% of the economy. But the digital economy, what I call digital manufacturing, is another 10% of the economy, and that's growing much faster. So that seems to me to be a much bigger opportunity for these funds.
And that also touches on industrial strategy. Other thoughts about where we get this replacement capital if we need it, Simon?
Yeah, I'd just say we shouldn't assume that EIF in particular is closed for business. I mean, they are at the moment saying they're carrying on investing in the UK.
I agree. That's fair.
But they are always incredibly slow. But I would really, I hope that BBB, British Business Bank, will get lots more support from the Treasury. I know that you guys are applying for it, and it will be very important because we need that sort of priming of the pump.
And particularly maybe at local and regional level. I speak to a lot of businesses who think the only place to go for capital is London. Yeah, and there isn't enough around their local environment in Birmingham, in Newcastle, etc. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, so I agree that it needs to be spread around the country, but it also needs to be spread around the economy. So we invest in digital technology, and it is the sexy area where it can be the highest growth, and a more normal scale-up businesses find it harder to raise money, not just around the country, but also in London. So I do think that as far as possible, there should be initiatives to help other types of businesses.
And what comes with that money, though? Smart money as well, I've heard. I mean, it's not just about who gives me the money, but what do you bring with it? I mean, there's more assessment of that.
Well, that's a great thing, whether you're an angel or a VC. The fun thing, I think, about being an investor is not just providing the money, it's providing the help. And we as a VC house, episode 1, our whole thing is about being a lot more than just the money. We focus on helping companies go from seed to Series A. And actually that's the bit I enjoy, is helping businesses. And so I think as an angel, if you can, you've got to be very careful, because some entrepreneurs don't want to be imposed upon. So there's a subtlety where you have to provide mentorship but not dictatorship as an investor. And as long as you get that balance right and choose the right entrepreneurs who are capable of being mentored and actually benefit from it, then you end up with a great relationship. And the right investor is capable
of not being a dictator.
Exactly. And it's really important not to be. And you can't, once you invest in more than a handful of companies, you haven't got the time to be a dictator in any one company. So it becomes a much more healthy relationship as long as you've got a proper sized portfolio.
I'm going to turn to the audience in a moment, but James, I wondered if there's more opportunity for the crowd in this space. We have things called ISAs. We all know ISAs, many of us invest in those. Is there a more opportunity for the crowd to pick up maybe some of this follow-on scale-up funding versus early stage?
I mean, there absolutely is. I mean, that is, at Venture Founders, that's all we do. We don't do startups. We only do businesses that are past proof of concept and are growing. There's a bit of a challenge in my mind. There's two things. One of which is, for us, most of the businesses that we're raising money for aren't B2C. They're B2B or B2B2C. And actually, the pure crowd, is really more only interested in B2C opportunities, and particularly interested in SCIS investing. So we have to do an awful lot of education about why you should be investing in scale-ups, and particularly why these great B2B opportunities should be something that you should be considering for your portfolio. But I think done in the right way, I mean, we're already seeing it. We're putting, £500,000, even greater chunks into a VC-backed and angel-backed deals, even more in some cases, and it can be a great source of liquidity.
So that collaboration between finance asset classes is beginning to shape better, do you think?
Yes, and I think it is. I think I can't remember how many VC-led rounds we've done now, but we've done a lot with Tim and the Angel Co-Fund. We've done a lot with the venture community. They're very keen to have additional liquidity. I think when we talked about it, startup versus scale-up, the SEIS has, for me, been a great thing. I mean, it is a great thing, but the tax benefits around it do tend to lead people to wanting to invest in those types of opportunities rather than actually sometimes where we need to focus, which is more on what we're talking today.
And maybe exit too early. Okay,
Yeah.
over to the audience. Questions from the audience. Gentleman over there. Any at the back? Anybody wants to raise? There's one right at the back as well, just getting our mics positioned. One at the front. Please.
Yeah, hi, it's Peter Cowley here. You've talked a lot about access to human capital, access to financial capital, access to trade, but there's another big one around that's going to take multiple years to sort out, which is adoption of legislation and rejection of legislation. So I'd just like you to mention briefly, not particularly about straight cucumbers, but about CE marking, about waste directives and things like that, what you feel as a panel, maybe not all of you, but some of you, about the legislative changes that are going to occur in the next 5 to 10 years, how that's going to affect the early stage ecosystem.
Okay, well, Peter, the legislative change is one question. Gentleman here, you had a question as well. We'll just take them in a cluster. The mic's just coming. And there's one mic that needs to be right at the back. Carry on.
Okay, so yeah, Nathan Nagel, open question. Looking at all the different countries, which one would you, top 2 countries, recommend looking for opportunities now we'll be moving towards free trade? So how do you see, in the Brexit context, where do you see the opportunities laying?
Okay, good. Well, those 2 questions, legislation, where the opportunity is. Who wants to take it first? Simon, there we go.
I'll take the last question. I mean, I think that's one of the key reasons why you could have thought very carefully about the EU referendum, was the growth opportunity in the rest of the world, for me, is simply much greater than in Europe, because Europe is flatlining. It needs significant reform. Most of the economies are in trouble, with the exception of Germany. And so I see there's a massive opportunity in the rest of the world. And there are obvious big countries growing very fast, like China and India, which is where we should be making a big effort.
Simon, one challenge on that, I think, just purely is, when I speak to entrepreneurs, EU in North America is always top of the list of where they're thinking of moving towards. How do we encourage entrepreneurs, investors to think India, China? I mean, it's where I've spent most of my career in Standard Chartered. How do we encourage that Middle East, African, Asian opportunities to be sought after?
Well, personally, I think it's happening already. I mean, you just see it in the makeup of the companies that I've invested in. I mean, they're really international people already, yeah. And I'm investing alongside VCs, but I'm also investing. 2 of my companies have had investment from China alongside me and other angels.
And does it help, to the point made earlier, if the talent and skills also come from some of those markets?
Absolutely, they do. And I think that's another reason why you need to think very carefully about Brexit, is that we should be looking at attracting talent from all over the world, not just from Europe. We should be thinking globally, not just, we shouldn't be typo EU. I'll let somebody else answer Peter's much more difficult question.
The legislation one, so I was going to pick that one up.
I'll go for your question, Peter, about regulation. And I think the thing that's most disturbing about the uncertainty of the next few years is knowing whether or not we're in the common market and the European market. And if we do stay in the European market through some sort of successful sort of negotiation, then I think a lot of those regulations will continue sensibly, because then it makes it easier to trade. So as a sort of somebody who voted very pro-Europe, that's where I hope we end up.
Yeah, I mean, one has to be optimistic. The Canadians finally signed their trade deal with the EU at the weekend. Well done to Canada. It took a long time, but things continued to work even despite that signing. So I think there is an element of, I think you said it, Simon, earlier, we just need to get on with it, don't we? And just, there's lots of challenges, but keep that focus. Any other thoughts on that point on regulate? Tim?
I was just going to go back to Simon's comments on facing beyond Europe. And I think the mathematics is pretty simple, that depending on how you define the Western world, Europe, North America, we're 15% of the population. So all of the growth the vast majority of the growth is outside of that block. But it is happening. I mean, we had 2 companies around the time of the Brexit vote. One was a sale to a Chinese acquirer of a business, a a diagnostics business, and the other was an IPO it was a UK development team, but purely focused on the Chinese market. Both of those businesses were unaffected, so the sale went ahead, the IPO went ahead, and it's been very successful. So a lot of confidence there in that global, both for inward investment and the outward focus. But the key thing is, in both those cases, having that multi-talented team, and a team, back to my point about commercialization, people that really understand the markets they're going into and how to sell into those markets, how to engage with that.
And do you, when you co-invest as a British Business Bank, do you point towards DTI, the Department of Trade and UKTI, as colleagues that can help these businesses you're co-investing in?
Yes, certainly.
Signposting? Okay.
Where it's right for the business. I mean, our model philosophically, with the British Business Bank and with the co-fund, it's all about finding the right partners for the right situation, whether that's as a fund investor, investing in funds with people with the expertise that Simon's got. As an angel investor investing alongside Simon, people with the expertise in building those businesses. So, yeah, horses for courses.
Is the mic at the back yet? Do you want to? There is one individual at the back. As we take that question, I wanted to go along the panel and just say one thing the angel investment community, the UKBAA, should do in light of all of the discussion we've just had. What do you think the UKBAA and the angel investor community should do to help this next stage of evolution in the UK? Sarah, do you want to take that first?
I think lobby for a very clear stand and plan for immigration.
Okay. Simon? Tim?
Which one?
James? Yeah, which one? Choose which one, Sarah. They're both grey-haired.
I already said it about find your role models and get them in the press. It's very good for you as an investor if getting publicity for your companies.
James?
To me, about ensuring there's greater collaboration amongst the investment community, particularly the entrepreneurs, the angels, the VCs, and the trade bodies.
And important for that to happen locally as well, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Very important for it to happen locally. Yeah. Regionally is incredibly important.
Yeah, becoming more so. Tim?
I would say don't lose your nerve as investors. There's going to be wobbles on the road ahead. Possibly the 8th of November is going to throw up some interesting changes. We'll see what happens there.
He wants to bet on that today.
but realise, for most of the companies we're investing in, the biggest risk they face is financing risk. So we need to keep supporting them, we need to keep funding.
Simon?
I've probably made all of those points, but I think ultimately for me, celebrating success of entrepreneurs and promoting success, that's what we need to do. I mean, Sherry said it earlier, we're very British. Yes. We don't celebrate success, but that doesn't mean we've got to brag about it, but we've got to be very clear about what defines success. So invite the most successful entrepreneurs to number 10 or whatever it is and celebrate with them.
Yeah, celebration at number 10, Jenny. There we go. And maybe we take something from the Trump campaign as well about how one celebrates one's success. Have we got the question in the back, or are we nearly out of time? Yes, we have.
Tim Levitt from MVM Private Equity. Following the change in the VCT rules last year, there's approximately £1 billion of liquidity in VCTs ready to invest in early stage growth businesses. And I'd be grateful for the panel's advice on how VCs can best connect with angel organisations.
Great question about that connectivity. Is there any other question that anybody wants to ask? Because we're going to pretty much end here. One here, and then we'll take this last question here. We'll take that mic there. Jenny, maybe you can get that over there. Thank you. And there we go.
Thanks. My name's Rod Taylor. It was just in terms of trying to encourage the commercialisation. We've had tax credit schemes for some time now, which have been useful in terms of cash flow, etc. Do you think there's a space for an export tax credit scheme?
Great question. We've been talking about another bit as well at the Scale Up Institute. Okay, two great questions, I think. One about collaboration and how the VC, what the advice there, and one about export taxation. So, Simon, you've got the mic there.
I mean, on the first question, in my experience is the VCs are already pretty well plugged into the earlier stage network, and that's a sort of two-way thing. I mean, I make an effort to talk to VCs and to ring them up occasionally if I've got a particular company that I think might be a strong idea for them. All I really ask for back in return is some feedback. If they think my idea is stupid, I'd like them to tell me. Or if they think they're the wrong type of funder or they're conflicted in some way, I just like them to tell me. They don't need to tell me why they're conflicted, obviously. So that's the only thing I would ask VCs to do. But I think by and large they are very well plugged into the earlier stage angel network, and they are aware of the companies that are coming through. I mean, most of us are pretty transparent. I mean, for example, all my investments are on my website, so anybody can look them up. And I do that deliberately because it's helpful for people to see the sorts of companies I've invested in, the sorts of people I've backed, and it enables a VC to look at my page and say, look, that's where Simon is, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
So.
Can I add something to that question from the other side of the fence, which is that as we've been raising our second fund, we've been told by our investors, the limited partners, that one of the key things for us is to show to them that we're very connected to the later stage investors and that we can take deal flow to them and it gets treated seriously. So I would say the same thing is true for you guys as angels. You ought to reach out to VCs, not just put things on your website, be really open about which are your most exciting businesses, ask for meetings with people like us, the VCTs that we just talked about, get to know your later stage investors, because then you're much more likely to raise money for your companies. One of the key questions I often get asked is how should an entrepreneur approach a VC? And by far the best way to get into a VC is to be introduced by somebody we respect. So I think your role as an angel is to be that person that VCs respect, and you ought to be networking with VCs to help your multiple companies to then raise money at the next round.
James.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting point. So we're right at this bridge between sort of angel funding and VC funding, and there's a number of our deals now that we're actually taking through and putting through to the VC community, and that's really important. This whole thing of collaboration, I still think there's this barrier between angels and entrepreneurs, and understanding where the next stage is for them, and understanding who they need to talk to, what they need to be doing. So, but I as I said before, I think the UKBAA can help massively in that.
And I think that's right. I mean, something that Jenny and I talk about a lot, because even if the investment community isn't as well connected, think about it for the entrepreneur or the business owner or the really scaling business owner. He's actually got an awful lot of other things they're worrying about on customers and talent than funding. We need to make it more simple to connect. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the questions. We didn't quite... Anybody for an export tax? Views? Vote?
I'm all for the government being entrepreneurial and trying lots of different things. I think that's what it calls for.
Yeah, so an export R&D, so it might work quite well type. Okay, very good. Well, listen, thank you so much. I mean, I take from this quite actually a positive outlook overall. There are challenges, but we can meet them. We're up for that, and there's lots of opportunity, and there's opportunity to do that in a very good way, collaboratively in the private sector as well as with the government, and clearly our international colleagues. And thanks again to Canada House for hosting today. They have a role to play and be investors in this. So we'll talk to Aaron later about how many Canadian angel investors we can connect everybody with. I mean, they're positioning themselves as the route to North America, so there's a lot of opportunity there. So thank you, everyone. Simon, Sarah, Simon, Tim, and James for your insights. They will be around, I think, some of them later over coffee. And we're now going to hear from Lloyds, I think, and the chief economist. So Jenny, over to you.